Hello, Brett Etheridge here, founder of Dominate Test Prep, and in this video, what I want to do is share with you an excerpt from a recent webinar that we hosted with the head of the executive assessment at the Graduate Management Admission Council, the GMAC, which, as you may know, is the organization that created the executive assessment. His name is Manish Dharia, so I want you to hear straight from the test makers the answer to the question, how is the executive assessment scored? And specifically, one of the questions I get a lot is, how does this whole section adaptive algorithm work, right? And it's important that you understand it as you think about what you are in store for on test day and how it will translate to your ultimate score, right? You want to get as high a score as possible, and so sort of knowing the rules of the game will help you do that. And so I could certainly explain it all for you, but I thought, hey, it might be better for you just to hear it straight from the test makers. So I think you're going to enjoy that. And then I'm also going to add on a section of the webinar where he sort of went through the common question types. So if you're not familiar with what types of questions you're even in store for on the executive assessment, stick around to the end of the video for that. But I will let you now hear from Manish Dharia as he breaks down the section adaptive scoring algorithm that you are in store for.
The executive assessment uses a section adaptive design. And what that means is it basically adapts section by section to meet you where your ability level is. The assessment is designed to start off with integrated reasoning. And for those that are really new, and I can't see the chat box if people have talked about, what their level of knowledge is, we'll get into the types of questions at the end at a high level. And then, I'm sure Brett has a lot of details on the questions themselves, but we'll give you a high level overview at the end of the question types. But we start with integrated reasoning, and integrated reasoning questions are very similar to what most people experience on the job or in the business school classroom. And we serve up 6, sort of mid-level integrated reasoning questions. And then based on your performance across all 6 of those questions, the test adapts and then routes you into another set of 6 integrated reasoning questions. And if you did really well on those first 6, more than likely you'll end up in the harder set of 6. And if you didn't do as well, you'll end up in the slightly easier set of 6. And so there's 12 integrated reasoning questions. And then what we do is we look at how did you perform across all 12 of those questions and then route you into verbal reasoning. And verbal reasoning starts with a set of 7 questions, and then the test adapts and routes you into another set of 7 verbal reasoning questions. In that way, you see 14 questions on the verbal side. And the exact same thing happens on the quantitative reasoning side. We go back to your integrated reasoning performance, those first 12 questions you saw, and then we determine where you should start out in quant, and then you get routed through quant based on your performance on the previous sections. And so in that way, you see the 40 questions, and you get a relevant experience that really meets you where your performance level is. And the thing about integrated reasoning, and the reason the test starts there, is it's very highly correlated to both verbal and quant. So it's a good starting point for the test, and a good way to understand where to move you as you progress through the test. Just a little deeper dive on the test itself. So as I said, it's very quick. It's 90 minutes. The way it starts out is you have to go into a check-in process, and most recently in May, we just launched an online version of the executive assessment. And so whether you go to a test center or whether you take it online, you're going to be faced with a check-in process. Both processes are going to take roughly the same amount of time. We'll talk to you a little bit about that later in the presentation. But just be ready to spend about 15 minutes doing that, plus or minus. And then, as I said, you start with integrated reasoning, 12 questions. Verbal comes next, and quant comes last. Each section is 30 minutes, total of 40 questions. There's no breaks on the executive assessment. We just kind of get you through and get you out the door. And each of the sections is scored on a 0 to 20 scale, and the total score that you will get back in your results report and that the schools will receive is on a 100 to 200 scale.
All right, so there you go. You now understand what you are in store for in terms of how the executive assessment is scored. And as promised, and as he alluded to, I'm going to go ahead and show you sort of his explanation and walkthrough of the different question types. But first, if you haven't already done so, click that subscribe button. We have a lot of really good content lined up to release here on this channel about the executive assessment, so be the first to know by clicking that subscribe button. All right, without further ado, here's Manish walking through the different question types on the executive assessment.
I'm going to run through these sample questions very quickly. I think those of you that are interested in a prep course will go into a much deeper dive on these. Integrated reasoning, like I said, you have access to an online calculator. Multi-source reasoning is one of the question types. Literally, in this example, you get a number of different emails. You have to look through those emails and kind of get a sense of how to answer the questions from the information that's provided you across all of those sources. On the right side is another question type, table analysis. So basically what's going on here is you're going to get a table of data. You're going to be able to sort that data. Very simple. It's just going to be, just sorting, not too complicated. And then you're just going to answer a number of questions related to the insights that you can glean from that data table. Graphics interpretation, typically you're going to get a graph or some sort of histogram. It's going to be explained in the top right, and then you're going to get some drop-down multiple choice questions that you're going to be able to answer related to that graphic. And then two-part analysis, you're going to have to provide two answers here. Typically, in this example, you're just trying to understand what the rate of increase is for each of the organizations. So just remember, you're going to be providing typically two responses for two-part analysis. Quantitative reasoning, problem solving. These are questions you can essentially you can actually do the math. If you know the formula, put it together and do the math. You can try to reduce the response options by figuring out if the answer should be odd or even. It's really up to you as to how much of the question you want to really fully solve, or how much you can get to an answer by kind of just reducing the universe of possibilities. Data sufficiency. Really, you're not really trying to get to a right answer. You're trying to understand if the information provided is enough to answer the questions. And just bear in mind that the response options are typically going to follow a similar structure. So again, a good place where you can familiarize yourself with that so you can quickly move through this. Verbal reasoning, reading comprehension. I think most of you have probably seen this on other assessments, but you're really trying to kind of understand, what is going on in the passage. How would you answer the questions based on the information provided? Similar to what you would do typically at work, or if you're doing a case study in a business school classroom. Critical reasoning. These also follow a very similar structure. Some of this is, potentially when we ask people, they're like, oh, that's just common sense. So that may be the best approach to this but just make sure that you understand the question stem is typically going to follow the same approach. Again, so just get familiar with how these are structured. And then finally, sentence correction, which interestingly enough, we hear from candidates, often non-native speakers do better on this because they answer it with what is right as opposed to what sounds right. So just kind of bear in mind that this is really getting at sort of true grammar skills with the English language.
All right, welcome back. I hope you found this helpful, understanding what you're in store for on the executive assessment. But of course, knowing what the question types are all about is one thing. Knowing how to answer them, how to get right answers on all of those question types, especially perhaps the math that you haven't seen for a while, well, I've got you covered there. So head over to dominatetestprep.com/executive-assessment to learn all about the different options we offer for empowering you to get right answers, including our comprehensive executive assessment prep course. Take the guesswork out of preparing for the executive assessment. Get the score you need to get into the graduate program of your choice. Head over to dominatetestprep.com. I will see you there, and I will see you in a future video here on this channel, hopefully. So again, click that subscribe button, and I will see you next time.